Bath's a bit slow. Okay, fine. It's 9:59 according to the wonderful system here, but it's 10 o'clock according to real time, so I don't know what's going on. So welcome, it's lovely to see you, particularly rich in cabinet members today, which is lovely. Thank you for coming, and thank you for all those people who have substituted for other people. Thank you for sparing the time to come. Okay, so we have an emergency evacuation procedure, which you've probably heard before, but I'm sure you'd love to hear it again.
When the continuous alarm bell sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. The designated exits are signposted. Arrangements are in place for the safe evacuation of disabled people.
Thank you, Michaela. Apologies and substitutions.
Apologies from Councillor Ian Halsall. Apologies from Councillor Jess David, who's been substituted by Councillor Duncan Hounsell. Apologies from Councillor Grant Johnson, who's been substituted by Councillor Sean Hughes. And apologies from Saskia Hedges, who's been substituted by Councillor Sam Ross.
Okay, so we move on to declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare anything in particular that they feel they should? Okay, that's good. I do not have any urgent business, but I would like to point out that my style of chairmanship is a bit, I don't know, it's not strict's probably the wrong word, but I like things to be precise and get on. I don't like waffle. So please, if you're asking a question, can you keep it brief and to the point? And if you're answering it, can you also keep it brief and to the point? And that way we'll get a lot more business done. So if I start looking a bit grumpy, that's the reason. Well, I usually look a bit grumpy anyway, so that's fine. Okay, so we move on to item 6, which is the public or councillor statements. I don't have any councillor statements, but I do have one member of the public. Carrie, I think, has been briefed. So when you're ready, Carrie.
Thank you for the opportunity to make a statement today. My name's Kerry Gilliland. I'm the chair of the Oldfield Park Community Alliance. The subject of the statement is the impending decision on the Oldfield and Westmoreland ETRO, following the consultation closing on the 29th of Feb. I hope the panel would support noting to the single cabinet member making the decision that they acknowledge the benefit of keeping the ETRO measures in place in future. To be clear, the community in Oldfield and Westmoreland would like the ETRO approved and not a return to the original TRO, which took little notice of the specific size, needs, and unique nature of our area. I fully expect the extremely high feedback to the latest consultation to confirm this when processed. The original TRO was rejected by the community, which did not stop implementation, but through support, engagement, and listening from council staff, we currently have a framework that works well for residents, amenity users, and businesses alike. There are, of course, a few hiccups along the way and ripples affecting areas around us, but on the whole, we have a system that works. I must thank Kath Brown and Andy Dunn in particular for their efforts in engaging with us in this endeavour. Since September 23rd implementation, there has been a noticeable absence of park and stride, rail commuters, and HMO overspill. Thanks to the increased number of dual-use spaces in the ETRO, I believe there has also been a net gain in reducing visitor journeys around the suburb, and the data I have attached certainly confirms these dual-use spaces are consistently well used. If the current system is allowed to remain, some adjustments may well be beneficial in the future to balance availability of resident and visitor parking across our rather large RPZ area and around some of our vital community amenities. It is also, in our view, imperative that the business and amenity permits created for use by our trades and larger institutions remain available as per the example comments I have attached. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kerry. Are there any factual questions for Kerry? John, and then June.
Thank you for that. My question is on the business permits. Are they for the staff of the businesses, or are they for customers visiting the businesses?
The answer is both. There are standard business permits for which the vehicles have to be owned and registered to the business address. There are other business permits created for staff and also for visitors. So, for example, with the churches, they have been given an allocation that they use on an infrequent basis for larger events, where funerals, weddings, for example. So the answer is both yes and no, essentially.
So on the ones for the business, how do staff get to the business now that there is that, the parking restrictions? Because if the business ones are for vehicles registered to the business, then that doesn't help staff who need to come in from a distance away. How do they manage still to come in and have somewhere to park?
Well, the answer, to be honest, John, is with great difficulty, even so. So the business permits, for example, I have one specific business permit where I've had to essentially sell the car to the business, register the car at the business. It's been extremely costly, but my business does not allow for any other opportunity because I have to be out and about all day, every day. And public transport is not appropriate for transporting people to viewings, for example. The staff, particularly on Moorland Road, there are some business permits, temporary business permits, which are helping staff come, but there are others that are having to park further away and walk, park and ride, and there has been a certain amount of disruption along the road from people who used to come in from a long distance away and have been put off from coming to work there anymore.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you, Kerry. June?
Thank you.
Didn't have your microphone on, but I think, did you hear it, Kerry?
Thanks, June. I think the answer to that I've briefly touched on in my last paragraph. The balance does need to be adjusted. There is an imbalance in the RPZ dual use, the extra dual use spaces between, for example, the western end of Moorland Road and the eastern end. But there are always going to be balance updates required to a system of this size. The first iteration of the system, I think there were 15 dual-use spaces, some of which in further flung locations from where they could have been. The updated version has worked considerably better, but there are still, shall we say, tweaks that could be beneficial to make the system work best. I mean, any plan like this could do with constant updating to make sure that it works with the changing community. For example, the cooperative leaving, just as the first consultation came in, took a massive number of hitherto well-used shopper spaces away, which was not accounted for in the original consultation. The co-op is now back with 30 spaces, which, to be fair, a lot of the visitors don't even know are back. So that's another point that needs to be adjusted for in the current ETRO. There are other tweaks potentially on disabled spaces I've had feedback on. There are suggestions that some of the tighter streets have areas where cars can be allowed to pull in to stop log jams. Crandale Road, prime example of that. Possibilities like that, but for the future, yes, I think a scheme should always be looked at on a regular basis and nudged around as necessary.
Okay, any more factual questions? Okay, thank you, Kerry. Right, we move on to the minutes of two meetings. The meeting on the 11th of January 2024, which was our last scheduled meeting, and then the meeting on the 19th of February, the call-in meeting. Does anybody have any issues with accuracy on these either minutes? Does anyone have any matters arising from those minutes? Okay, lovely, thank you. So we move on to Cabinet Member update, and unusually we have Sarah, who is here just for the update, and then she's going to skittle off and do much more important things, I'm sure. So we'll start with Sarah, and then Manda, you also have an update, and thank you for giving it to us in advance, much appreciated. I don't think we'll expect an update from you, Matt, because you know you're not really sort of the in-crowd cabinet member for this scrutiny panel, so you're let off. So Sarah, first, please.
Hi. So I'll send this round to you afterwards. It's just it's a simple update of the things that are current. So in terms of tree cover, Bath and North East Somerset and the Natural History Consortium and the Forest of Avon have led on the development of a Forest for the Nation bid to DEFRA. If successful, we've applied for £150,000 to develop a full business case along with 3 other applicants. Baines being the lead local authority in the bid, and we expect to hear in the autumn. If successful, we would then get £9 million over 5 years. Then on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund to parish councils, there will shortly be an announcement about parish councils who will benefit from a total of £260,000 to help install energy-saving measures like solar panels and air-to-air source heat pumps, helping to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. On the local nature recovery strategy on which we're working closely with the West of England Combined Authority, there will shortly be a consultation which will be an opportunity for the public to feed back on the identified biodiversity priorities and mapped focus areas for nature recovery across the region. And it will then be available for publication later in the year. Another piece of news is that we've just kicked off the round of another round of the Green Heritage Homes. No, that's not the same as the one that was last year. It's a different thing? Correct, okay. So it's a new thing, the Green Heritage Homes Project, a partnership between Bath and West Community Energy, Bath and North East Somerset and Bath Preservation Trust to enable retrofit of listed buildings in a way that is appropriate for their fabric and heritage. And we have a planning officer also now focused on applications for retrofit of listed homes, providing level 0 pre-planning advice. We are looking forward this weekend to the Climate Hub, holding a springtime assembly this weekend at the Assembly Rooms, and we are supporting them towards finding a more permanent base. And I enjoyed attending the Bath and North East Somerset Climate Youth Summit a couple of weeks ago on the 8th of March. I attended with transport officers, and we had a small group. We worked with them to find out from them, as part of our local plan consultation, their thoughts on what were the barriers to them being able to take more active and independent travel. So that will form part of the local plan transport consultation around active travel. So that brings me on to transport updates. So there's a lot going on. So in terms of local plan, we'll start there. We are putting together an active travel master plan, and as part of that, it's part of the wider consultation, but we're doing other pieces of consultation, such as the one with the school students that I mentioned, setting out the future network of active travel infrastructure that will support residents in having real alternatives to the car. Also part of the local plan, the other documents that are part of the local plan are available on the council website to do with transport. So there's a lot about transport in there. It's really worth going to have a look. There's transport vision and objectives, an overarching transport context, a network mobility study, and transport strategies for the individual towns are planned. So individual journey to net zero plans for the towns around Bath and North East Somerset, having published one for Bath City a year or two ago. So you can go and look at those and feedback on them. On other transport news, strategic transport news, so City Region Sustainable Transport Fund is a scheme by which we have £130 million allocated to Bath and North East Somerset for infrastructure to support better public transport and active travel links. So one strand of that, Summer Valley Links, deals with the A367 and the A37 corridors, and the outline business case of that was approved at the West of England Combined Authority Committee on the 26th of January. So further work is now ongoing. Separate from that, separate strand of work now is around walking and cycling routes in Midsummer Norton and Westfield, and that went through a single member decision a couple of weeks ago, and public engagement will take place on that later in 2024. The A4 Bath to Bristol strategic corridor was approved at the 15th of March, West of England Combined Authority Committee meeting to move to the next stage, which I believe is full business case, and we're working closely with WECA to ensure that the views of communities along the route are heard. Aside from that, so as part of the budget setting, Scholars Way was allocated £2 million from the Clean Air Zone Reserve to deliver the western section of the scheme, and we continue to investigate funding sources that will permit us to progress the eastern section. Also, as part of the budget setting, we approved £250,000 also from the Clean Air Zone Reserve to begin the development of a school streets programme, and we anticipate going forward with a pilot scheme during the coming financial year, and are developing an engagement strategy to inform how we will prioritise that. There's the Active Way social prescribing pilot in Summer Valley, which has now engaged over 550 people in activities such as inclusive cycling, wellbeing walks, led rides, one-to-one cycle training, buggy walks. And then good news on the Clean Air Zone. So that hit the 3-year milestone last week. And based on 2022 full year data, government announced last week that we have now achieved what they're calling state 3 of 4, which is good success. And we saw during 2022 that there was an average reduction of 27% in nitrogen dioxide, both within and also surrounding the zone. And we have replaced and upgraded over 900 vehicles. And finally, I was going to give you a bit of information about some new data that you can access on our website, because I know people were keen for more information and more data. And you'll be receiving an annual report which has moved this year from March to July. The reason for that being so that it can be reporting on a full year's data as opposed to part years. It had previously been in March simply because that was the anniversary of the month in which the climate emergency was originally declared, but actually moving it to July will give you a more intelligent insight, I think, and comparable year-on-year data. But in the meantime, if you want to know how we're doing, you can go and take a look, and I will send around the link as well as the bullet points to the strategic evidence base, which you can access on the Council public website via the climate and nature emergency pages.
Lovely. Thank you, Sarah. John?
Thank you. Not so much a question, but as the Cabinet member mentioned the Climate Hub and the Spring Assembly that's coming up, I thought I should put on the record I am a trustee of the Climate Hub.
Thank you, John. Duncan?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the West of England Combined Authority and the A4 corridor study. As we know, there was a significant public consultation late summer. One of the items, one of the suggestions was the Keynsham bypass having a bus lane. Now, I was promised that I would get a report sent to me with the outcomes of that public consultation, and I think Salford Parish Council was also told that it would get a report. You mentioned that WECA's just had a recent meeting, 15th of March. So is the feedback from that first consultation actually available, and can the bodies like myself see sight of it? You
might be aware, Duncan, that we do sometimes have some difficulties obtaining information from WECA. If my memory serves me right, but this is just from memory, I believe that the public consultation report was due to go to the 15th of March committee and in the end was not available in time, but I will chase up that information for you.
Yeah, that's very helpful, because I would also like to see the information, because I had quite a lot of postbags on the issues around the Cantillon bypass in particular. So thank you for that, Sarah. Was there another question? Yes, Sam?
I've actually got a few, but I'm happy for other people to interject.
Well, it depends if anyone else wants to ask.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've said quite a few, it's about 3. A citizens panel on active travel in 2022 commissioned by the council to determine the best active travel route from the valley floor to Claverton down. In the report that went to Cabinet on the 10th of November 22, it was stated that a future project should revisit all options for traffic reduction on the route. Has this project started, and if not, when will it start?
I think as part of the active travel master plan for the district, we'll be mapping out all the routes that we hope to implement around the district, and we're also working on a circulation plan for the city, and all that will lay out which routes will be coming forward, and it will provide a basis for prioritising in what order we go ahead. But as you know, progressing any project around the whole district on any form of active travel is dependent on obtaining a source of funding. We don't currently have funding for that route.
Thank you for that.
Okay, before we go back to Sam, has anybody else got any other questions? Okay, Sam, it's all yours.
One on the school streets, the £250,000 funding from the Clean Air Zone allocated to the programme. Can an update on the school streets be brought to this panel? And when querying the process on school streets with the chair of this panel and the chair of Children, Adults, Health and Wellbeing, PDS, Councillor Dina Romero has suggested a task group to be set up from both panels.
Understand the second bit, can you say that again?
Yeah, apart from having an update on the school streets, I think this is from Saskia, so I think when she queried the progress on the school streets with the chair of this panel and also the chair of Children, Adults, Health and Wellbeing, PDS, or maybe this was actually Councillor Dina Romero then suggested a task group to be set up from both the panels. Is this possible?
I'd like to understand more about what this task group would be tasked with doing.
Let me help. Basically, this has wandered between me and Dina and back again. The idea is that we need some group to investigate, a group of councillors to investigate school streets going forward, and we're still negotiating quite how that task group will be formed, and I'll bring it to the chair and vice chair meeting in the near future.
Well, if such a group is formed, I'll be happy to work with them, and we can certainly timetable in an update on school streets. But as you know, like all other active travel type projects, we are dependent on finding pots of funding. So at the moment we have 250,000, which is likely to fund perhaps 1 or maybe 2 pilots in the coming year, and we'd need obviously to roll this out, this programme out substantially further and faster around the district. We would need a big additional source of funding, so there will be limitations on just how fast we can move.
I have another couple of questions. Are you okay with that, Andy? I'll keep them brief. Yeah. Clean Air Zone. Would it be possible to see an account of how revenue from the Clean Air Zone will be spent on sustainable transport projects? I think there was a flagging up of the car club focusing on Bath City Centre and about other areas in Bath and North East Somerset. How much is Baines investing in the car club and how many parking bays are available?
Are they the same question or different questions?
I think you can take them separately if it
So,
makes more sense.
In terms of the Clean Air Zone fund and how it's being spent, I'd be surprised if it isn't already in the public domain, but absolutely if it's not, I'm sure we can obtain a breakdown and share that. So the car clubs, I don't have that information to hand about what's being spent on them. I can tell you that we are working with Como UK. I believe there was recently a presentation for all councillors to hear about how so Como UK are a charity who specialise in this field and who have been doing some initial mapping to work out which areas of the district they believe from first principles are likely to be successful locations for implementation. I don't have any information to hand about how much is being spent on that, but I'm sure we can obtain that information. Was there another part?
There's one more question about cycle hangers. Would it be possible to offer blue badge holders and or family discount? There's an example. If a family wants to take up to 3 spaces in a cycle hanger for 1 adult bike, 2 bikes for teenage children, this would cost them £126 a year, almost twice as much as the parking permits in an RPZ for an electric car. Is this fair? An RPZ parking permit for a blue badge holder is free. Would it be possible for residents who are blue badge holders to opt for a free cycle hanger space instead?
So that project is led by WECA, but I absolutely can ask that question. It's a very good suggestion, and I can inquire whether that's possible.
Okay, I have one question. You mentioned in your introduction, your update, that there's £130 million for infrastructure change for cycle routes. That's WECA, is it?
That's the Baines portion of the City Region Sustainable Transport Fund. It's not just for cycle routes. It's for the so things like bus lanes and cycle routes. So that's the total sum of that's available to Bath and North East Somerset for all of the City Region Sustainable Transport Fund, which was for 5 years. Must have been from 2022 to 2027 to spend it in. So it's one-off funding for infrastructure. So that's what's funding the Bristol-Bath corridor and the A37 and A367 corridors, and also we recently consulted on public transport and walking and cycling improvements around the city centre, and there will be another consultation coming forward soon for other cycling and walking routes around the wider Bath area.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for Sarah? If not, we shall move on to Manda. Manda?
Thank you, Chair. We circulated the note in advance, so I hope people have had a chance to have a quick read. I'll just pick out a few highlights. I'm actually just going to pick up something that Carey said as well. He's absolutely correct that there has been a lot of input into the ETRO that concluded on 29th of Feb. The work is being done to go through that. I've yet to see the output. I confidently predict there will be businesses saying we want more dual-use spaces, and there'll be residents saying we want fewer dual-use spaces, so we will do that balance once we see all that input. The team has been incredibly busy. We're similar to councils up and down the country. The weather seems to be conspiring against us entirely, and it's the absolute perfect storm, no pun intended, to bring more and more potholes forward. So we've been incredibly busy doing gully clearing and potholes. I don't want to get political about HS2, but the fact that the northern arm of HS2 was cancelled, actually we got a 1.2 million allocation from that money as a pothole fund. So we have now got an increased pothole fund that we're actually splitting between potholes on the roadway and actually putting some towards pavements as well, because some of our pavements have also had the same impact. So it's good to have got the extra money, whether or not you think cancelling HS2 was a good thing. We have got an awful lot of our traffic signals. I'm just picking out a few bits. I hope you've will answer questions or anything else. An awful lot of our traffic signals are coming to end of life. So we are asking for money to replace them. And as we are replacing them, you may have noticed in some of them, like Queen Square is an example, we're going with the slightly more modern ones that can give priority to cycles to start before cars can start. And where possible, we're looking at doing the ones that automatically switch to pedestrians as a pedestrian approaches. But I would be lying if I said we're going to be able to roll those out throughout the whole authority imminently, but we are looking for some more money. And as we're replacing them, we're having the conversations about what should it be a like-for-like replacement, or should we do something slightly different? We're very close to finishing our transport improvement programme for the year, and we're doing a lot of the work to start what we're going to be starting to doing for 24-25, which is over twice as much work as we've ever committed to doing before. So getting this scheduled, getting this in, getting this delivered is going to be a challenge, but I have every faith in the team that we're going to be doing it. Livable neighbourhoods we've covered, I think, unless there's anything else. We had a big report last month and last meeting, and we're still going along on that. Forward plan of work, we are, as I say, we're working on the TIP, we're working on the action plan. We've got a paper coming up later today about spreading the emission-based parking charges throughout the authority, so I won't go into that. Livable neighbourhoods, the first one that's going in under ETRO in the next tranche is the Sydney Place one. It's due to start being put in on the 2nd of April. It may take up to 2 weeks to put in, and then it will be in for between 6 and 18 months, during which period we will have a full public consultation, we will do traffic monitoring, we'll do air quality monitoring, and we'll have an end of trial specific survey to see how it works, if it works, whether or not it needs some tweaks, whether or not it should stay in, or whether or not in fact it hasn't worked and needs to be taken out. I think those are the key bits that I wanted to point out. More than happy to answer any questions.
Mercifully brief, Amanda. Well done. Okay, Duncan.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful. You mentioned pavements. Now, I know that the local authority has very good records about the state of our roads and streets. Surveys are done that enable the authority to know how the roads are behaving, underneath the surface and so on. As far as I'm aware, we don't have the same records for pavements. So we can prioritise the roads in a very sort of sensible way. How do we prioritise the pavements, and do we need a process for making the authority aware of problem pavements?
So you're absolutely right. There is a machine that can do it on the roads it's terribly technical. I've looked at it once and I just thought, I have no idea how this works, but it seems to work, which does not work in the same way on pavements. But we have been doing a lot of work to go through the asset everywhere, because you're spot on right. And that's reflected to a certain extent national priorities, which have always been about roadways rather than the pavements, which obviously impact on cyclists as well as cars. So, there is an active travel benefit to doing that. As I say, we're doing the asset work now. The issues we have are certainly in the heritage areas. If we're replacing like for like, it is A, incredibly expensive, and B, quite hard to source some of the pennant stone now. So there's specific areas there. What we're trying to do, and as you know, I think probably one of the best examples in North East Somerset is the High Littleton pavement. As we're putting pavements in some of the more rural areas, we're putting them in with very sustainable surfaces. So we hope that we don't have to do the kind of maintenance that we've had to do. If there's a complete issue where something has broken, Fix My Street is absolutely this is a bit of a crisis, please come and fix it place. But if you are aware as a ward councillor, or when you're going around of a pavement that you think is particularly in need of going on our regular replacement maintenance, please do let us know, because we are building up a list in the same way as at the budget period last time we came out with a list of all the roads that are going to be resurfaced next year. It is I was going to say it's my aim, no, we're actually going to end up in a place where we can say the same for pavements.
Do we give that to Andy? Is that who do you give that information to?
And I will make sure it's on the officers' list.
Okay, June, yeah?
Thank you. You can hear me now. Going back to the potholes, I had to go on and on about Brook Road Bridge. It was just one side was just all pothole. I then went up about a week ago, and great, a lot of them had been filled in. The chap was there with his all the equipment, etc. And I said, oh, thanks, this is brilliant. However, you have left one or two. Why? And he said, oh no, we are told specifically which ones we can and cannot do. And I said, well, that seems crazy. You're here now with the equipment, with yourself, everything. And already I feel it's going to start breaking up because apparently, it wasn't deep enough, but it was still deep enough for a poor cyclist to get tripped on. So I just wondered, when you have a big block of them, like we had on that bridge, why is the whole lot not done?
So I'll take that specific away, June, and look at what happened there. To try and, I hope this doesn't come across as too defensive, but trying to be fair to the officers, we do say we have to tackle the worst potholes first. So they will be in a position of going, well, actually that is a pot, but it's not at the level that reaches our limit. But I will look at that specific, because you're right, if people are actually there sometimes, it might be as well to say, well, it doesn't now, but before it does, why don't you do it while you're there? But I can't answer about exactly what happened on that one
Okay,
right now.
thank you. Also, going back to the fact you're going to upgrade, by the sounds of it, the lights system, may I put a plea in, please, for the making a more pedestrian-friendly one on the one along the Lower Bristol Road, near opposite the Belvoir Castle pub, because if you've just missed those lights, you have to stand there for an awfully long time, and it's a very heavy, busy, polluted section. And often I go home when I've been along the Lower Bristol Road, and for hours all I can breathe and smell is pollution in my nose.
Again, I'll have to take that away because I don't even know if that's one of the lights that is due for renewal. But what I can say is what I said before, when they're coming up for renewal, we're looking at the phasing and to make sure that we're giving pedestrians. We have a statutory duty to keep the traffic moving, but that doesn't mean that we should prioritise that over, I have one in my ward, where if you just miss it, you can be standing there for, you know, it is only 2 minutes, but 2 minutes feels quite a long time.
A lot of heavy lorries go by, pouring up,
Yeah, so what I can commit to is that we're not unthinkingly just replacing like for like. We're looking at each of them as they come up.
Thank you. And my last plea, you mentioned about the roads being resurfaced now, and the pavements. I, for years, have requested certain pavements in Westmoreland Ward to be done, and I put it in and I comment about it. I never get any feedback. I just think we're always shoved back to the bottom of the list. And with the roads, I would like to maybe meet up with you to arrange that Westmoreland we have a lot of bitty roads, a lot of potholed roads. And for somebody like myself and many other people... Can you get to the question, June? Yeah, well, it's really a continuation. Oh, yeah, no, I haven't started that one, you're quite right. When are you going to please come and do some of the roads in Westmoreland and resurface them? That's my question.
So I will get an officer to get back to you with where we are. As I say, we have got... The roads are an asset as well as something that, that deteriorates. And we have got literally a list where the machine... So there's no point me going and looking at a road because all I will do is look at the surface and go, that looks better than that. That's not what we need to do. We need to get the machine that looks below the surface to see what's most likely to crack, what's most likely to go. And so we do it in a very objective, data-driven, evidence-based way, and there is a list, but I will get someone to get back to you on where the particular roads that you're interested in are on that list.
Thank you.
It's fair to say that pavements across the authority are not great, are they, really?
If I can make an added comment to that, we have underinvested for the last decade as a country, actually. We should have been investing a good 2 to 3 million per year to just keep it steady state.
Right, Sam.
Nice to hear. I have several questions. First of all, I'd just like to thank you for redoing the pavement in Farnborough, which I've been asking to be redone for about 4 years. So I know you personally haven't done it, but thanks to the team for doing it. And you're responsible for the team, so a bit of good news. Quick question, is there an update on the circulation plan? And if not now, when is that likely to be happening?
You're asking the wrong cabinet member. I'm very sorry. Having said that, I am aware that there's work going on and I was invited along to a meeting, but I'm not the expert on the timeline for when it's coming on. Sorry.
I think it's one of those crossover bits, isn't it? It's kind of difficult to know who it actually fits under. Thanks for clarifying. On the point of paper parking permits, you responded that everything is reviewed in the budget process, but we haven't seen a review of parking allowances for councillors. Could a review of paper parking permits be undertaken as soon as possible?
I mean, it's not on the work plan list. It's fair to say it's not on the work plan list. Given the level of money that it may save and the amount of time it would take to look at a new policy, I'm not certain where it will fit on a work plan list. I'll take it away and have a look. But I think if we look at the things that are of real importance to our communities and residents, a lot of the delivery that we're doing, that people have, like you say about your pavement, you know, people have been asking for things for years. I think we're on a bit of a trajectory to do that. And we're doing twice as much as we have done in the past. I don't particularly want to take officers away. I'm not saying no, but I prefer to tell you the truth than make some weasel answer about, yes, we're going to look at it imminently. Don't think we are.
You have for me to continue, Andy? Yeah, okay. Thank you for the answer. Staff parking for major employers in Bath. The REUH has recently amended their staff parking policy so that people living nearby with good public transport links don't qualify for parking permits. But is Baines working with other major employers, such as the University of Bath, to introduce similar schemes? Hopefully that'll be a quick answer.
Yeah, is the answer.
Thank you. Another one on parking. I've got about 3, but some of them are related to what's coming up today as well, so it might be worth asking. Yeah. Sorry, do you want to ask a question, Sean?
No, that's fine.
You can do. I'm happy to cut in.
I'll wait. I've got questions for the actual item on the agenda.
Okay. What is Baines doing to attract new staff and retain staff in transport and parking services? I mean, this is related to, I think, the parking charges coming in. There are concerns that we're raising prices, but how are we actually enforcing that if we don't have the staff to actually keep on top of that? And I think there are issues around Lambridge and the edge of Walcott, RPZ, with serious parking problems that are resulting in buses becoming stuck.
So Andy, who's sitting behind me, has worked phenomenally hard to get the team as close to up to strength as possible. It has varied, I think it's fair to say, hasn't it, over a period of time. I now get a monthly report which shows me where all the civil enforcement officers go, how many times they view a car that could potentially be transgression, that they have to wait for 10 minutes, they have to do this. So I am confident that as we are putting in the RPZs, we are doing enough enforcement given the resource that we've got. That's different from car park size. I'm talking about the RPZ side. And we are, as I hope you know, doing a big RPZ review to look at some of the areas, particularly like near you, where we've put in an RPZ and there may be now people who were not keen on having an RPZ before who now think actually this is the right thing for us to do. So I'm fairly confident we're doing as good as we can on that.
One thing on RPZs, just last question. Yeah. 2 areas adjacent to the Walcott RPZs have now requested them in their areas to stop the overflow of parking as a result of the one that's brought in Walcott last summer. Will action be taken to start the process for consulting on these new RPZs ASAP, and what mitigation measures will be used in the meantime?
So this is all part of the overarching RPZ review, and it will all get caught up in that. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we gave you quite a hard time in that update, but I think we've finished now. So sadly, or happily, you're on again. I was just thinking you might have appreciated a small break, but there you go. So we have 40 minutes to talk about the implementation of car parking charges and proposals across the whole of Baines. As I said before, keep it brief, and when you're ready, man.
I have a presentation.
Congratulations.
When I say I, the team. The team. Thank you. Yes, so for those of you who don't know, gentleman sitting behind me, I think most of you will know, is Andy Dunn, who is our our parking guru. I think I'm going to call him that. I think that's probably the best way to do it. So what I've been asked to do today is further to the budget, what are the next steps that we have to take. So if I could have the next slide, please, Andy. When we do any of these interventions around parking, we're doing them because they fit into our overarching strategy of what we're trying to achieve in terms of environmental impact, in terms of pollution, in terms of clean air, etc. And we do have these both as core strategies that have been adopted by the council over a period of time, and we also have some statutory requirements that we have to hit as we go along. Air pollution from traffic remains possibly in some cases the major contributor to poor air quality, and that has a huge impact on the health of people, especially vulnerable people, children, elderly, heart, lung conditions. There was a stat, it was a national stat rather than a local stat, but asthma, people having asthma attacks who had to be hospitalised go up by over 30% in a week where there's poor air quality. So there's very direct, measurable impacts on our residents by doing this. And so all our proposals are complementary to all the other projects we're doing. It's not a silver bullet where we can do one thing and solve it. They all come together. And it's fair to say, although there are targets and legal limits which get changed, the World Health Organization is trying to change them, has changed them already, and they've not yet been adopted in the UK. Although there's limits, there is no safe level. Can I have the next slide, please? We were the first council outside of London to bring in the clean air zone, and we were amongst the first nationally to introduce emission-based permits. A lot of other councils are now following on, and I've spent a fair amount of time, and I'm sure Andy spent even more, talking to councils where they said, you know, what have you done? What do you think's worked well? What would you maybe do differently? And one of the things I'm very proud of that we did, and it cost us slightly more money to do it, but as we were moving to this, we did not then say we're forcing everyone to go digital. We have retained the fact that we can do cash and card payments in our car parks, which I think is to our credit. I think we all know the world is moving digital, but we absolutely won't leave people behind whilst we're doing it. The underlying premise behind what we're doing and our consistent approach, which we're taking now throughout the authority, is that the more polluting vehicles pay more. The polluter pays is the principle. And that helps to incentivise the use of sustainable and some less polluting alternates. So, and everything that does this will, of course, feed into our climate and nature emergency aspirations as well. Could I have the next one, please? So what did we say in the budget? We will be looking at doing a modest review and increase in car parks and on street, and that is throughout the authority. And a key thing is that we will be introducing some charges, or looking to consult on introducing some charges with some free parking in Midsummer Norton and in Radstock. Additional revenue, we ring fence to a large extent. It's not in a ring fence pot that you can sort of look on a budget line, but everything within parking has to come back, and it has to form a virtuous cycle of what we're doing. So we will help support regeneration schemes, which will be aimed to increase the footfall and support the local businesses in the areas where we have introduced the parking. It was interesting to hear Carey today. This is different because we're talking about car park charging here as opposed to the on-street RPZ parking, but the businesses who were very, very, and you've had this feedback, I know, June, the businesses who were really, really quite concerned about the fact that they thought footfall would absolutely disappear have found that because we have worked together well as a team to introduce some of the dual-use spaces, that in fact it's encouraged a more turnover of shoppers, so it's actually had a benefit as opposed to a disbenefit. The other thing we're putting in is about motorbikes. Increasingly, motorbikes are of a size that means that they take up a full bay or a full space, so we're looking to charge them as well. Could I have the next bit, please? So what are we looking to do and when are we looking to do it? As I say, we went to full council with indicative budget figures that we had to hit. And we're coming here, this is a key stage to us to get the input from the scrutiny panel before we go out to a TRO, a traffic regulation order, which is what we need to do in order to change anything. We're aiming to do that in the coming weeks. Over May, we aim to have our public consultation where people will be able to input their thoughts. And we genuinely read every single one of them, and we encourage everyone to come in with their thoughts about how we can do some of this stuff. October, we are looking to make our charges live, basically, that's what it's saying there. The outcomes we're aiming to get all our outcomes in August. If we get all our outcomes in August, that will then give us time to review, see what we need to do to be ready to make any of the changes that we think we're going to be made by October. So what am I asking of you today? It's because this has gone through council already. This is to note or to give any feedback that you think will be valuable to us. So you can note the proposals that we've put forward as a review of the parking charges, to continue the progress we've made in Bath on air quality and to reduce congestion and ultimately to encourage other ways to travel, and to note the delivery of the method of emission-based car parking charges to all council. These are council, obviously private car parks can charge what they want to do, but to extend the method of delivering the parking everywhere. I've done far less than 40 minutes. It depends on how many questions I get, Chair. There you go.
I don't think it was ever intended that you should speak for 40 minutes, Amanda, but I'm grateful that you were brief enough. Okay, so questions. Sean.
Thank you. Okay, so I've been looking through the report. I'm just trying to understand with Midsummer Norton. Can you confirm that you're still going to be providing 2 hours free parking and free permits to the shop owners? So, no, Sean, what we've clearly said is that we have made no decisions. We cannot make any decisions without going out to TRO and consultation. There will be options for people to talk about what kind of free parking they want, and I know that your ward colleague's done a lot of work to see what people would require, so I absolutely cannot prejudge what the outcome of a TRO and a consultation is going to be in advance. Sorry, but we've had this pantomime between you and Michael Alton for months now. We've had brochures put for leaflets for our letterbox saying Michael fights to save free parking, and you say, and there's a lovely cosy picture of the pair of you saying what a great idea it will be to give these permits to the shop owners and to confirm 2 hours free parking to allay the fears. And it looks like at your report, you're looking at 30 minutes free parking at best. And then it seems to be that no sooner are you going to implement the parking, that you're going to increase the pricing in 2025 by 20%. So I can understand how you can look at the report and maybe think that you've taken that away. I have never, ever said that there will be 2 hour free parking. What I have said is part of what we will be consulting on. That is our consistent message, and that has been at the request of Councillor Orton, that I've put that in our consultation period. The actual, what we tried to do was put in some tables that showed what parking could potentially look like. So we did do some comparisons with Keynsham as an example, where there is a half-hour free parking there, so the table of charges is in there. This is going to, I hope I can't be clearer, this is going out to consultation. We will see what people think. There may be a whole heap of people who come back and say, do you know what, half an hour is good enough. That gives us enough time to go to the shops and come back. There may be a lot of people who say, do you know what, in order to get my hair cut or whatever it takes, I need 2 hours. That's why we do a consultation, and these aren't sham consultations. We do consultations to listen to what people feel is better and then make the balanced decision based on all the input we get. I feel that the residents of Midsummer Norton have been totally misled by yourself and by Councillor Alton on this. Read your own leaflets, read your own data, look back at the videos from the cabinet meetings, look at your videos from the scrutiny panels that this has been discussed at. It's been totally misleading, and the report clearly says 30 minutes. 30 minutes, not 2 hours. It mentions nothing about supporting the residents. How on earth you think this is going to improve footfall is beyond me. And as far as using the excuse of air quality, we don't have an air quality problem in Midsummer Norton. So using this climate emergency as an excuse to bring in the parking, I'm really not sure how you can justify that.
I hope I made clear, everywhere has an air quality problem. There is no safe level for pollution, and I would hope that you would want to make sure that your residents were as protected as we're trying to make the residents in Bath, that the more polluting vehicles pay more, and that will nudge people over a period of time, admittedly, to make choices that bring less pollution, especially the people in our areas who are vulnerable and who suffer from asthma or who have got heart complaints. That it is absolutely wrong to say that anywhere can hand on heart say there is no air pollution issue, because that's just not the case.
Sorry, I don't want to dominate this discussion, but this emissions-based parking charges, which you were talking about, just penalises our poorer residents. In Midsummer Norton, a lot of our residents, they can't afford an electric car. They can't afford the latest fuel-efficient vehicles. Some of them have to drive a 20-year-old diesel Astra because that's what they don't want to. That's what they have to drive to be able to get around, to do their job. And you're penalising them.
Shall we just have one last? Yeah.
Just say that, actually. So that's your last go.
So, and yet, where you are correct is there are some people who are driving 20-year-old diesel Astras. At some stage, those 20-year-old diesel Astras will not be drivable anymore. And what we want to do is at that stage is to nudge people when they're making life decisions to think about, as part of the things that they bring in mind, what is that I really, really need to do? And if you heard what Councillor Warren was saying earlier about the work we're doing about cycling routes and walking routes within your area, for some people that will never be an option. I accept that. For some people, a car is going to be their only option. For others, a lot of others, there will be options around cycling and walking if we provide the infrastructure and the safety, and if they feel that by doing that they're not breathing in other people's pollution, that they will then take. The vast majority, a lot of people who are very low income have no vehicle whatsoever, and they are breathing in other people's pollution. I think it's fair that we protect those people as well.
Thank you. Sam and then Michael.
On the point of the consultation, especially for Midsummer Norton, is it going to be going to the school in the area? Because I know that there's a lot of parents that end up having to park at the Midsummer Norton, the main car park, to pick up their kids because they either can't get on the bus because they're obviously of an age where the bus doesn't apply to them, or there's some other reason why they need to. So I do know that if you go there at certain times of day, the car park is literally full of parents waiting for their children to walk to and from Norton School, basically. And I feel like it feels like a bit of a, if all they're doing is picking someone up and there's no other option because there's no transport, are we consulting with them specifically about what that issue is and how that can be resolved?
So it's a wider question, I think you're asking, Sam, about how we manage to make our consultations get to the widest number of people, especially groups who traditionally don't necessarily engage in doing a consultation process. So absolutely, I'm really keen that we try and capture those kinds. So I think, as Kerry said, we work very closely with the church, as an example, in when we were talking about Moorland Road, in that we knew that that was a focus for where a lot of cars were coming in and not. So things like the school, I think there's a couple of clubs that are there. Absolutely, we're going to talk to them, yeah.
Michael?
I just wanted to make clear that when I started the campaign around the 2-hour free parking, I had made it very clear at the beginning that I didn't want to have parking charges brought into Midsummer Norton by choice, but I fully appreciated the position that the council were facing in terms of funding. And throughout all of my campaigning, I've made it very clear that my aspiration is for 2 hours of free parking, and that's what we're aiming for, and I'm still fighting for that now. And I do appreciate when you see the notes that came through on the report, seeing that half hour, that took me a bit by surprise. But if that's just the basis on what Keynsham currently have, and that's just being used as a guide, then actually I am very keen to be encouraging as many people as possible, both for and against 2 hours parking, to take part in the consultation over the next 6 weeks, so that we do get as many views as possible. Now, I appreciate that Councillor Hughes thinks that I'm involved in a pantomime and that my exercise of standing on the door at the car park talking to people was just a complete waste of time and was not scientific. I've never claimed that my community engagement program, if you can call it that, was scientific. I wanted to get the idea of what people felt and felt what would be a fair compromise if we had to start paying parking again. And based on the conversations that I've had, and based on the 150 people I've spoken to, 4 out of 5 people actually only park there for 2 hours. So a 2-hour limit would be very popular for the majority of people using the car park. And that's what's driven my campaign. And obviously I very much appreciate the support that I've had from Manda in working with this. And that actually, and I would want to work with Councillor Hughes if I could, but actually I'm working on behalf of those people that I've spoken to who all felt that actually a 2-hour limit, I mean, though the majority said that actually they don't want parking, and I fully appreciate that, and you know, I'm one of them. But this is about trying to make what's best for Midsummer Norton and to try and make sure that we can do the best for the majority of people that use the car park. So.
Any other, Sam?
Other matters, not just Midsummer Norton, you'll be pleased to hear. One about Bath parking charges, whether it's good practice to offer 30-minute car parking charges in the city, and what behaviour we're encouraging by offering such a short time on street car parking. Is it possible to start charging from 1 hour for on-street parking location in Bath, in line with other cities such as Oxford and Bristol?
So I don't want to land you in this, Mr Dunn, but when it comes to being the expert on how we've worked out all the different charges and where they cut in, I'm not the absolute expert on the details, so I am going to delegate that one. Andy.
Thank you. So we have a much shorter period of parking on street in Bath, and that's something that was supported within the parking strategy that was adopted in 2018. That itself is currently pending a review and update. It was recognised in that strategy that that on-street parking, whilst competing with residential parking, typically has a much higher turnover. It's there to support that higher turnover, and people that want to come in and pop and shop, they're making shorter visits, they're not coming in for 4 hours, therefore the sustainable options like the park and ride may not be suitable for the type of visit they're making. That's the reason we have the shorter durations, and typically they max out at around about 2 hours in the core city centre. There are some longer periods elsewhere, but it is driven by the amenities available within the area.
Sean, you want a question? We'll come back to you. I'm sure you've got another one, Sam, so we'll come back to Sean. Sean first.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll move on from Midsummer Norton because I don't think we're going to get any further with that one. Motorcycles. I'm a keen motorcyclist. I have several motorbikes. But I just don't get this. I mean, if I'm understanding this correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, so if we've got a young lad, got himself a 125 scooter, or even a 50cc scooter, to get to Bath, he's going to Bath College, or he's got his first job, or he's got an apprenticeship. Am I right in saying he's going to have to pay potentially £15 a day to park, £300 a month? Is that correct?
As part of the consultation that we're doing, we're going out to consult, as I say, about charging for motorcycles, and I'm sure people will have a range of views. A lot of the motorcycles, and so where we've got information on them, we charge according to emissions, the same as everywhere else. It is difficult if we don't have emissions actual based from the DVLA information, so we will have to treat them the way we treat cars when we don't have those emissions-based stuff. A motorcycle now, if it's taking the same space as a car and is being as polluting as some of the cars can be, I refer you back to our original statement that our policy is the polluter pays. So this will go out for consultation, yes.
Sorry, you're saying that a 50cc moped, which is 50cc, you can get 20 of those in a 1 litre engine. You're saying that you're categorising that in the same category in pollutions because you haven't got any data?
No, Sean, what I'm saying is that we're going out to a consultation that says, are we looking at this in the right way? Should we be charging motorbikes? And if so, how should we be charging them? The suggestion in there is that we default to the highest level if we haven't got the data. That is being consulted on.
Sorry, but the report is the report I've read is supposed to be how we're going to implement all of these charges. And now everything is now hidden behind a consultation process. It's been proposed in the document. And I'm concerned about how accurate this document actually is, if so much of it can be changed during the consultation process.
I mean, if you read the document, Sean, it takes you through the timeline of what we're doing and when, and it very clearly says we're going to TROs. The Transport Regulation Order goes out to consultation. There is no lack of clarity that these are proposals that are going out to be consulted on.
Okay, back to Sam.
Thanks, Andy. On the park and ride charges for obviously people that don't get on the bus, it's one thing that I've always wondered and residents ask me is how is this actually enforced? I mean, what incentive is there for people to pay these charges other than just goodwill? What data do we have relating to numbers that use the park and ride as a car park only? Can we know how many use it for this purpose and also who use it for the purpose but don't pay? And then what is the benefit of such a small charge versus the cost of administration?
So we are doing a bit of a review generally about park and rides. I think it is fair to say that we, like the enforcement we do in other areas of the city, we do it spasmodically. We're not there all day, every day, with someone standing there to take your pound if you're doing it. There is a charge, there is a cost to us of running a park and ride in terms of maintenance. And for some of the areas, so the Lansdowne one specifically, on Sunday mornings was getting, full is a strong word, but there were an awful lot of users up there who were using it to park there to play football, which we want to, obviously we want to encourage, but not at the cost of people who wanted to then use the park and ride coming in. So I think park and ride as a concept is slightly old-fashioned if we think of all of it as being as somewhere that someone drives a car to, gets out of the car, gets on the bus and goes somewhere else. What we need to do is say, what are people using them for? And some of it may be, we want to use it actually as a car park because we want to take a ramble nearby, so how do we allow for that? Some people may be saying, do you know what, I'm more than happy to get on a bike from there, especially if it's an electric bike. Coming into town, probably easier than going back out. But, you know, it could be an interchange between a car and a bike. Could be an interchange where we have bike, I don't want to bring up the word WECA again, but you know, if we get to the stage where in the next BSIC, the next bus service improvement programme, we end up getting what we want, what I think everyone in this chamber wants in terms of better rural connectivity, there is an argument for some of them that those buses should terminate at the park and rides and people could get on a park and ride bus there. So it's part of a bigger question I think you're asking, which is how can we best use these facilities that we've currently got? And should we be charging people who are using it basically as a car park as opposed to a way of stopping the most polluting vehicles coming into the towns, especially a town like Bath that's in a bowl where once pollution's here, it's trapped and it stays here. You know, our ideal is that people think, why would I ever drive into Bath to do that? I'm going to use the facilities, whether it's bus or active travel or a hotel can run a shuttle where people park there, they go and get picked up with a cargo bike for their luggage. You know, there's all sorts of things that we can do. It's quite exciting. That's part of the reason that we took the park and rides in-house. We have the right to make these decisions as long as, if Mark Elliott were here, he would be nudging me in the elbow here saying, as long as we make sure that we make sure that that service pays as opposed to as a drain on resource.
I think just in follow-up to that, I think the point I'm making is that there's no way of actually knowing whether someone currently is parking there just to walk or to get on the bus. Because like today, I could pay to get on the park and ride with cash and get a ticket, a paper ticket. There's nothing in my car that says I'm parked there, I've got on the bus. There's nothing that says that I'm just parking there and then I'm getting on my bike or walking somewhere. So I think my question is how we actually I mean, most people will know this, so how it is just a goodwill system at the moment, and how are we going to move from that to something where it actually, you know, encourages people to actually, well, so we actually know that they've paid and that they are actually using it for that purpose. I think that's a question.
So we're developing a new, we're at early stage of developing a new payment system for park and ride, where actually you pay before you get on the bus. And that will require an entry of your registration number. So it will be very clear who's using it as a park and ride and who isn't. It will also stop some of the issues that we've had in the past where people have said, you know, I got on the bus and I didn't pay. It will make it easier and faster. One of the key limiters for people wanting to use a park and ride is when they say it takes too long. But if the admin of the payment is done prior to getting on, then people are just literally getting on the bus, and we have the data of, you know, who's used it and who hasn't, it will make that bit much simpler. So we work. Sorry, I misunderstood your question.
Thank you. Going back to the emission-based charging, what evidence do we have to show that people have been incentivised to either buy a less polluting vehicle or use alternative sustainable travel?
The evidence we've got is, and it's going back to what I was saying about, it's not one of these things that says we're going to solve all pollution. The evidence we've got is through all the items that we brought in, is our air quality is getting better.
Okay, thank you.
Sam?
Follow up on that one a little bit. I think, yeah, I mean, so is it really just, is all the data just being based on air quality rather than actually anything else? I mean, it's that whole thing of needing baseline data before you introduce new charges and after implementation, and understanding whether people's behaviour has changed as a result of those things. So will visitors' data on high streets be collected as well to determine whether footfall has changed?
So the outcomes are all based on what our data is saying is happening with air quality. The measurements we're doing are different. So a prime example is we don't know for a fact, so we need to actually work out for a fact whether or not the prime users of people using our park and rides are predominantly tourists, or how many people are using it to do their daily commute. So I believe data is king, and I believe that the more we can do measuring, if you measure it, you know where you're going to. Now, have we got a mechanism by which we say, you know, when this came in about 18 months ago now, I think it is, in the car parks as opposed to the on-street, has there been a significant shift in the proportion of people who have bought or used a diesel car? I don't know if we're ever going to be able to get that data, because there'd be different people who come from, you know, different parts of the country. There are some granularities that we can't get down to, so there has to be a bit of broad brush. But if there's some specifics that we think really show how people's behaviour has changed, and, you know, one of the things for me is I want increasingly to see the weight of the way people are travelling into Bath. I'm sorry for the North East Somerset Council, I'm going to be a bit Bath focused here, move predominantly to park and ride, or park and whatever the next bit is, rather than coming in and using our car parks. So it has to be at that level. We don't have the right to, we don't have access to the granularity that says how many people have now changed the car to something different. We just don't get that.
Okay, June.
Thank you. Are you basing the quality of the air quality just in the CAS area or in surrounding areas of Bath as well?
Surrounding areas, surrounding areas within Bath, and there are certain pockets outside of Bath that we've done an awful lot of measurement in, but, you know, air doesn't know that there's a line and that side's CAS and that side's not. What we have found that I think is, it goes counter to what I thought might happen, which is why we have to measure this stuff. The air quality just outside the CAS has got as better as the air quality inside, because people, and this is going back to your question, Councillor Ross, is people, if they bought a less polluting car, that less polluting car is less polluting wherever it's driving, not just within the CAS. So it's been overall good for clean air in the area, not just within the actual CAS zone.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is my last question. It comes back to enforcement of charges, but this time within car parks. And obviously, if we're introducing within car parks which haven't traditionally had any kind of parking charges at all, such as Midsummer Norton, then are we attracting more staff to actually cover that enforcement? Because I'm aware that it's quite patchy at the moment as to whether or where people actually are going for that kind of thing.
I'll answer the first bit, and then I'm giving you pre-warning. I'm coming to you about the direct staff bit. One of the mechanisms we have in order to make sure that we are incentivising people to not drive in is our car parking charges. So it's although obviously there's a financial benefit to the council, and I'm not going to hide behind that, what we're trying to do with the enforcement is to get people to a stage where they think, there is a valid alternate, and that's where we need to get better service, I think, from WECA. And we've also got to keep our charges at a level where people don't feel, well, if I park 3 times or 4 times and only get caught once, the penalty charge notice, which is set at a level nationally, this is not our thing, it's almost worth my risk. So enforcement is key in order not just to sort of do I hate seeing people with, sorry Andy, but I hate seeing people with parking tickets. If they park somewhere that's really unsafe and caused issues for other people, no problem at all. I just worry about people who've, not thought properly to do what they were doing. So enforcement is key, not because of the money, or not just because of the money, but because of the behaviours that it incentivises. Second part of your question, are we sure we're going to get enough staff to carry on enforcing adequately? Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Ross. Typically, I think we've recognised that our coverage in some of the more rural areas, particularly where parking charges don't apply, has been lighter than we would probably expect our own standards to be. So that's why I've been working with my team, and we have been increasing our deployment in some of those more rural areas outside of Bath. So there's the increased presence in Canesham and Midsummer Norton and Radstock, and started to see that as well. That's been helped by an increase in the number of officers that we've got. We very nearly reached capacity earlier this year. We still get some turnover, but the job market nationally has changed, and we felt the impact of that as well to the better. So, of course, the introduction of charges means we need to, if it happens and goes ahead, means we need to monitor that more readily. However, one of the things we did alongside the machine replacement and the investment in our infrastructure this last 12 months, which will be due to be completed by the end of March, is new pay and display machines that require your vehicle registration mark. We can't use automatic number plate recognition systems to enforce car parks. The legislation won't allow us to do that. But what we can do is we can use these systems to help us monitor our car parks. Broadly speaking, I prefer my officers not to be in our car parks. I prefer them to be out and about in residential areas because that's where people want them most. So a combination of the new technology that we're implementing, the use of cameras, well, that allows us to understand what's the compliance level in that car park today. Do we need to even send in someone there? Because if we're at 98, 99%, well, then they can go to the residential areas instead. So that will help with enforcing those areas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sean, do you want to ask a question?
Can I ask one more, please?
This is the last question.
Very much, yes. So we know there's not been any parking surveys and impact assessments done at all in Midsummer Norton. Are you aware of the current situation? I mean, we're already seeing the other smaller car parks like Poundland, like Lidl's, whatever, imposing parking charges. There seems to be in your report some understanding that Sainsbury's will take some of this because they do have 2 hours free parking in the Sainsbury's car park. But what we're seeing now, and potentially what we're going to see, is the sports centre, which has parking issues, being taken over by parkers wanting free parking, which means the sports centre participants won't be able to park there, and the knock-on effect will go onto the adjacent streets. It will go into all sorts of different areas. So are you actually going to do any modelling of the impacts?
Modelling is a strong word, and it means different things to different people. Are we saying that we would introduce car park charges post-consultation if we get the feedback that would lead us to make that? Are we saying we'd just do that and then go, right, that's it, car park charges are in, we're not going to think about anything else at all? No, of course we wouldn't. We would absolutely see what the impacts were on neighbouring streets, what the impacts are, as you say, on private car parks. It is phenomenally difficult to say in any transport, no matter how much modelling you do, how much desktop things you do, whether it be a livable neighbourhood, whether it be an RPZ, whether it be a car park, it's phenomenally difficult to say how people will react if something changes. What we absolutely commit to do is monitoring what those changes are and mitigating against them if they are things that we would not want to see.
So the response is to be reactive, not proactive, effectively.
Response is to look at data and evidence and base it on that.
Okay, and that I think brings us to an end to the questioning. I'd just like to remind panel of the work that these people are doing, Amanda and Andy and the rest of the team, and the philosophy and the principle of what we're trying to do is actually get a cleaner Bath and North East Somerset and to encourage people to live a healthier lifestyle. And I don't think anyone in this room would disagree with that. But the implementation of these things is always much more tricky than the sort of philosophy behind the argument. So I'd like to thank Amanda and Andy for the work they're doing. I think they're doing a really good job. I think it's important, rather like the next item, that if there is a consultation process going on, that we actually take active part in it so people understand that they do have some control on what is going on. And I don't believe that these parking are a done deal, just like I don't believe that the local plan is a done deal. I think that it is important that we actually engage in the process of communicating and putting the views of the people forward. So I have got some views on parking charges in Keynsham and Minsummer Norton, and I will take part in the consultation process at the appropriate time. So thank you both for coming. I appreciate it.
Staying for the next item, Chair, would that be okay?
Of course it would be okay. And just for anyone who cares, that was 2 minutes less than 40 minutes, so well done for that as well. And we move on to the other substantive item, which is the Bath and North East Somerset local plans options, and we have Matt and Richard, how can I forget his name? And Richard talking to us about that. So same thing applies. If you could keep your presentation brief so there is more time for questions, and the questions keep theirs brief as well. Thank you. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Richard has a presentation, so I'll just say a few random words to start with. First of all, this is a process that starts with the Secretary of State, who tells us we have to calculate, using their calculator, how many houses we've got to build over the next 20 years. And it's a process that ends with the Secretary of State, who appoints a planning inspector to run the public inquiry, to look at what we've done, to make sure we haven't done anything that contravenes national planning policy. So it begins and ends with the Secretary of State. I've said before, there's no such thing as common sense in planning. There is only policies. So, and where there is political interference, things fail. So this is a policy-led activity, which is why Richard will be leading the presentation.
Before you start, there was one thing I wanted to say to Amanda. Apologies. We're so keen on this consultation, and we have a meeting on the 11th of July. Would it be possible to see the results of that consultation at that meeting? Okay.
Over to Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll try and keep this presentation brief, but the scope of the local plan is very wide, but I will try and keep it as brief as I can. Just a sort of brief reminder that in the UK we operate what's called a plan-led system, and that means that planning applications must be determined in accordance with the development plan. And the development plan is basically the local plan and neighbourhood plans where those have been made. So clearly the local plan is a really key opportunity for the council to influence and manage any development that requires planning permission. And as Matt has said, the government very much does require that as part of the local plan process, we identify, along with the government, how much new housing development and new economic growth and supporting infrastructure needs to be delivered over a certain period, and then we have to set out a strategy and identify sites to deliver that development. So in terms of this slide, just obviously very briefly, the local plan that we are currently preparing will cover a period up to 2042, so it's a long-term plan. And once it's adopted, once it's gone through all of the statutory stages, it will replace the three plans that are shown on the left-hand side of that slide, so the core strategy, placemaking plan and local plan partial update. Just to set out, in the options document, we set out at this stage what we feel are the spatial priorities of the plan, and those very much align with the corporate strategy and the corporate priorities, and also enabling delivery of other council strategies, including the economic strategy and the health and wellbeing strategy. So going back to very much the sort of statutory requirements of the plan, if you like, the main focus of the local plan is on delivering housing, and particularly housing that's more affordable, because that's what's needed in the district, and also trying to move the economy to one which is fairer, prosperous and greener or more sustainable. And in delivering that growth and in managing development, that we make sure we achieve those priorities in the boxes at the bottom of that slide, particularly carbon neutrality by 2030 and climate resilience, obviously nature recovery, ensuring that there is connectivity, particularly by sustainable modes of transport for everyone. I won't go through all of those objectives, but those priorities, but they are absolutely central in terms of managing future development in the district. Then, just very briefly, currently we're at what's called the option stage. So, as part of preparing a local plan, we do have to test alternatives or options and consult on those. So that's the stage we're at the moment. Consultation is currently open, and that continues until the 16th of April. So we're consulting widely with stakeholders and communities across the district. Just very briefly, in terms of the structure of the document that we've published, the first sort of 4 chapters there, if you like, set out an introduction to the district and some of the key challenges that we're dealing with and some of the key requirements that we need the plan to address, and setting out again obviously those priorities and some of the principles that would lie behind the strategy. And then we've got 4 place-based chapters listed there, chapters 5 to 8, which set out an emerging strategy and options for each of those areas. And then the final chapter sets out policies that would help determine planning applications right across the district. And again, those cover a very wide variety of subjects, which I won't go through now. Just in terms of, very briefly, where we are in terms of sort of the need for further housing and jobs over that period. At the moment, we're suggesting the evidence shows that we would need an additional 725 houses per year, which is 14,500 homes over a 20-year period, so it's very significant. But again, as I've already said, the focus is not just on meeting those numbers, if you like, it's providing the right type of housing, and in particular affordable housing that's needed. And then in terms of job growth, alongside that, forecast of economic growth would suggest job growth of around 15,000 additional jobs over that same plan period. So that's reasonably in balance with the number of new homes we need to plan for. And again, the local plan is about trying to protect sort of space for employment uses, but also provide space for employment uses, new space, and space that meets sort of current business requirements, and focusing that on primarily on Bath, Keynsham, and the Somer Valley, but also not forgetting the importance of the rural economy and making sure that the plan helps to sustain that as well. And then what we've set out in the options document is a series of location options, and I emphasise the word options there again, location options that could help to contribute towards meeting that need. And those options, they're sort of underpinned by a number of principles, a key one of which is trying to make sure that we're focusing development where people have got better access to employment opportunities, services and facilities through public transport and through active travel, rather than having to rely on the private car. So most of those options, as you can see, they lie within the sort of Bath to Bristol corridor, where obviously there is good public transport and investment hopefully to improve that public transport, and also in the Summer Valley. So on that map, the areas shown in red, the sort of deeper red, are the options, if you like, that we presented for residential-led mixed-use development. The areas shown in a lighter red shading are those areas that we're sort of just exploring at this stage and just asking questions as to whether we should explore those areas further. And the areas shown in blue in the Summer Valley, those are areas that we're suggesting for employment uses or potentially for renewable energy as well. And then the final set of options, as I've mentioned, is relating to those policies that will help determine planning applications across the district. Broad range of subjects, very much building on the direction of travel that we set out in the local plan partial update and in trying to address the climate and ecological emergency. There are policy options in there that seek to further the provision and facilitate the provision of renewable energy, more stringent targets in terms of sustainable construction and net zero construction, as well as policies around trying to achieve a greater level of biodiversity net gain and nature recovery. So then this is a fairly dull slide, but this sort of summarises just the key stages of plan preparation that we've got to go through. So, as already said, we're at the options consultation at the moment. So that consultation closes on the 16th of April. We will use the comments we get back from that consultation, as well as obviously the input and views of this panel. That will be fed through into the draft plan. So the draft plan will go to council early next year, and that has to be a council decision. It can't be a cabinet decision at that stage. And it's at the draft plan stage that the council is in effect making decisions and is saying, we will propose to allocate these sites for development, and these are our proposed policies for determining planning applications. That draft plan is then subject to formal consultation for 6 weeks before both the draft plan and all of the comments we get are then submitted to the Secretary of State, as Matt has said. They're submitted for examination by a government-appointed planning inspector. It then goes through a process of examination, and that sort of the programme for that is completed at the behest of the inspector, and hopefully he or she will agree that the plan can then be adopted, and then hopefully we'll be in a position to adopt the plan towards the end of 2025. So the request of you today really is to discuss, but more to the point, feedback your views on the options in order that we can consider those in moving towards the draft plan towards the end of this year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Brief and to the point. Well done. Okay, Duncan's got his hand up, so we'll start with you, Duncan.
Thank you. Right, just to say, I take Councillor McKay's point about we don't want political interference, but that shouldn't stop ward councillors working towards or contributing towards a plan that's not just sound. We want more than a sound plan, we want the best plan. But of course, consistent with policy. I just been talking about policy. I want to pick up policy around green belt. In the National Policy Planning Framework, there's this paragraph, if I can just read it out. It says, before concluding that exceptional circumstances exist to justify changes to green belt boundaries, the Strategic Policy-Making Authority should be able to demonstrate that it is examined fully all other reasonable options for meeting its identified need. This will be assessed through the examination of its strategic policies and whether the strategy makes as much use as possible of suitable brownfield sites and underutilised land. So my question is, are you satisfied that you can justify or can you actually, are you in a position to argue that you've used as much as possible as suitable brownfield sites? Because that's obviously something the inspector's going to look at straight away. And just for illustration, I was sent quite a detailed report from a professional about the Charlie Down airfield site, which isn't one of the options, but it would be a brownfield site. So what's your comments about, have you exhausted all possibilities for brownfield sites?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hamsel. Yes, we have done a lot of work looking at brownfield site opportunities, and completely agree with you. We do have to maximise the development potential of those sites. What I should have said in that sort of 14,500 figure, you know, a significant proportion, over 6,000 of those homes, will come forward on sites that are already committed for development, and the vast majority of that 6,000 is on brownfield sites, primarily, not exclusively, but primarily within Bath. But of course, we will be looking to see if there is further potential on brownfield sites, you know, particularly on, obviously in sustainable locations. So that work will continue, but our initial view is that we will still need some greenfield development to come forward as well in order to enable us to meet that full need. And as you've said, in testing those greenfield options, we also need to show that we have considered alternatives outside the Greenbelt as well as within the Greenbelt in order to justify, if we feel it's appropriate, in order to justify the exceptional circumstances to release land from the Greenbelt. But at this stage, you know, we are very much testing options, so we've not got to that point yet. That work will continue as we progress towards the draft plan.
Just one more question for now, anyway. I've attended a number of public meetings, and without prompting, quite a few members of the public have noted that when you add up the numbers for the options for the strategic sites, it doesn't come to much more than the 6,000 or 7,000 still dwellings still needed to be found, and that's creating a feeling that this is a fait accompli, that what we're being presented in the consultation is what will be the shape of the final outcome. So my question is, do you think that there actually are sufficient sites being consulted on in this consultation, and is there room for choosing the best outcomes?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, I mean, we've deliberately tested and consulted upon a wide range of options. I think in total, those options, they would add up to around about 7,500 to 8,000, as you say, and that obviously is more than the 6,000 or so homes that we need to find on newly allocated sites. What I should say, and it does say this in the options document and the exhibition material, but maybe people haven't picked up on this point, is that list is just the sort of strategic or the larger site options. There will be other new sites that contribute towards meeting the need, both within Bath and potentially adjoining Bath, but also at some of the larger villages and potentially some smaller sites in the Summer Valley as well. So they will also contribute to that around 6,000 homes which we need to find on new site allocations. The other issue just to raise is that quite a significant proportion of our growth, population growth, actually derives from student growth. Students tend to be accommodated in different forms of accommodation, particularly purpose-built student accommodation. So again, the options document does raise this as an issue if as part of our strategy we were able to identify some sites for additional purpose-built student accommodation, that in effect would also reduce the amount of general needs housing that we need to provide. But again, those figures haven't been worked through yet because we are, and to repeat it again, we're very much at the option stage.
Can I ask, Councillor Hounsell made a point about the Charlie Down airfield site. Have you actually looked at that site?
So we have done a little bit of work. We are due to obviously have further discussions with Wessex Water, who own the site. There are a number of issues in respect of the site. Firstly, yes, it is a brownfield site, but it is in the Greenbelt. So if it were to be brought forward for development, it would have to be removed from the Greenbelt, because you would be talking about development that would have a greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt, and therefore would be what is called in national policy inappropriate development. So we would have to remove that site from the Greenbelt. The other issue is it's also in the Cotswolds national landscape as well. So again, it's a highly sensitive site, but it is a site we are looking at, and as I say, we will have further discussions, confidential discussions with the site owners as well.
Thank you. So my first, well, I don't know if it's a question or an observation, but I have to give you the feedback from my residents, which is, I mean, remember when I spoke to you about the LPPU, saying my residents struggled with the consultation. They couldn't engage with it, they couldn't navigate it, they found it impossible to work with. I'm really not seeing much improvement here at all from the problems we had with the LPPU public consultation. And I appreciate that the consultation period has been extended by, I think, a further week. But I think we've got to look at a longer one than that. So I think the majority of my residents don't feel they can participate in this, and they're really struggling to be part of this. There has been, the few that were able to make it to the presentation days found them very useful. But there was one in Radstock for an afternoon, there was one in Farrington Gurney for an afternoon. There's been nothing in Midsummer Norton. So I'm just worried that the information you're going to gain from the public consultation is going to be skewed and not truly reflect the views of the residents.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hughes. I mean, it is a perennial difficulty, I have to say, in terms of getting a really wide and representative engagement in terms of plan making. A lot of residents, a lot of people don't really see almost the relevance of planning until there's a planning application, on land right behind their home, for example, and then they really do get engaged. What we have sought to do, within the resources we've got available, we've sought to have a mixture of drop-in events, public events, primarily focused on those areas where most of the growth is well, not proposed, but most of the options for growth are outlined. But in addition to those public events, there are videos on the website. We've made quite a lot of effort to make the information as digestible as possible. It is difficult because the scope of the local plan is so wide, and it is a complex document. But again, there are videos available to view on the website which explains some of the key elements of the plan and explains how to comment and how to get engaged. There's a summary, executive summary document on the website. There's an easy read version. So we have gone to quite significant lengths to try and get as much engagement as we can. And we have had, good feedback so far. We've had quite a lot of comments come in so far. We've still got over 3.5 weeks left of the consultation. And when we last looked, I think we'd had more than 2,000 comments, which it may not sound a lot, but actually in terms of local plans, that is quite a lot. I think the most we ever got was probably on the core strategy, where we got sort of about 4,000 comments. So we've already had 2,000, and what we tend to find is most people will submit their comments in the last week or possibly the last few days of a consultation, so I suspect we're probably going to get the best engagement to date, but I accept what you're saying, Councillor Hughes. It's, you know, it's perhaps not as representative as we would like, but we are, within our resources available, doing our best to achieve that.
Could I just...
Just on that point, it's as Richard said, it is always difficult. But I was getting harangued on Tuesday night in Marksbury about the Burnett site, and we went on to the consultation website. I literally entered Burnett into the search box, came up, clicked on it, and there was the proposal for Burnett and the things to send your feedback. Did you support this, your comments? So in that sense, from the search, we found exactly what we were all talking about, and it was very straightforward. But as you say, I think when you come into the landing page the first time, it's quite complicated about knowing the journey you need to take through it. Whereas in fact the search engine is actually very helpful if you know in advance what you want to talk about. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the PowerPoint you've shown us today. My main issue I had with the consultation, which I think you have spoken to Councillor Waiterbat and Keynsham, was very much how it's based online, and we've got a lot of elderly residents, especially in my ward, who don't have a computer, or they'd find it very difficult to kind of access the documents. I was wondering if in the future, when we do this again, if we could have it where residents can have it on a form kind of thing. I know, Andy, you are writing one up yourself for Keynsham, but if this could be something that the council does across the authority, I think that'd be something which would benefit the areas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Beaumont. Yes, I mean, again, we're as a council, we are moving towards, and have for quite a while, I think, moved towards more online-based consultations, and so the local plan, in effect, also takes that format. We've tried to, as Councillor McCabe has said, we've tried to arrange the options document in a way that, for those that have got a computer, they can access the part of the document they're interested in and submit comments specifically on that part. There is also the capability to send comments to us in paper form, and that can either be as a letter or as a form that in effect sets out those questions and answers the relevant questions, which I think is basically what Councillor Waite and colleagues have prepared, which is very helpful. Again, it's a balance between making comments easy to submit, which absolutely they have to be, but it's also trying to make the comments as easy as possible and efficient as possible for us to analyse as a council. So that's the reason, if you like. It's primarily an online consultation with a sort of hopefully clear and easy to use web form. But as I say, there is that capability to also submit comments by post, because I accept not everybody has got a computer.
Yeah, if I can just add a few things to that. It's Councillor McPhee that's actually producing the papers, not me. I've been supporting him, but I feel it would be ungracious of me not to pass on the congratulations to him. I understand the difficulties that the council has and want to go to a paper-based system, but there are a lot of people who are a little bit computer wary. They may well have computers in their homes, but when they get into something like that, mentally they get a bit stressed out by using it. And I think it's not sensible to say if you've got a computer, you can use the computer to sort out the public consultation, because a lot of people are just not that good on their computer. They get their emails and they watch a bit of YouTube, and that's probably all they do. So it's a more complex picture than that. And I think it would be helpful for Richard in particular, is if any comments that come back do come back in a form that he can say, right, his team can say, okay, well, this is obviously to do with the Salford site, that comment is relevant to that, and therefore switch it across, because I sympathise with you if you're just going to get a load of letters and sort of essays from people written on bits of paper, because I mean, I don't know how you would analyse that. That would be very, very difficult. So I have some sympathy with where you are, but I do think that there should be more paper ways of approaching it which will support the online method. So sorry for that, that's a little speech. John.
Thank you. I have a statement which I've written and submitted, but in the interest of brevity, I'll try to paraphrase it. How we respond to the climate crisis is clearly an important part of the local plan, and therefore the local plan options. At the moment, within the planning options document, the two parts to our response, reducing our emissions and building climate resilience, the reducing the emissions is clearly the priority. And building climate resilience in the document at the moment is seen as a sort of secondary thing that can come in the wake of the four key areas where we do need to reduce our emissions. And I think that's the wrong way round. I mean, yes, we need to reduce our emissions, we need to carry on doing that, but you know, when it comes down to it, it doesn't really matter how successful we are here in reducing our emissions. The climate changes that we will face will be affected less than negligibly by what we actually achieve here. You know, if we are building a local plan that will last until 2042, if somebody towards the end of that plan is proposing a development that they think might last for 100 years, then we're looking at building developments, houses, buildings that need to be able to withstand whatever climate we're going to be facing in the middle of the next century. And if we look at the recommendations from the IPCC and from the UK Climate Change Commission, we could well be facing 4 or 5 degrees of global warming by the middle of then. And unless today we write into the plan the things that will force developers to acknowledge that so that they actually build accommodation that will still be the right accommodation, usable, inhabitable accommodation at the end of that expected lifespan of that accommodation. If we don't put that into the plan now, we will still be developing later on in the plan's period accommodation that will not be usable. So I do think the priority at this stage should be within the plan to focus on the things that we need to do to drive climate resilience in the developments, while at the same time continuing, obviously, to force emissions down.
Thank you, John. Yeah, very sensible comments, and certainly I've been supplementing what the officers have been doing in terms of the consultation. I've been responding to requests for presentations, and I gave one to the Bath Initiative, and Wessex Water were there. And again, talking about one of the brand new sites, Wessex Water was saying, you know, have you even considered the extra water that is falling from the sky and how that impacts? And I said, well, that's part of. And he said, yeah, no, we will be responding. But I said, well, it's nice to know that you're thinking about how much extra water is going to be falling from the sky and where that water goes if we start building new developments. But I think on the plus side, the next 14,500 houses that are built in Baines will all have a net zero energy requirement in terms of living in them. But the ones that have got through on the local plan partial update will not have what's coming up in this document, which is the embodied carbon in construction, and looking at those as well, so that we actually are looking at reducing emissions right in the supply chain. I mean, the trouble is, we can't, if we go too far, all the developers rally round and say it's undeliverable, it's unviable, and they lobby the planning inspector and say, the public inquiry and say, and then we lose the entire policy. So officers have a very delicate balance to tread between the big barristers who are hauled out at our public inquiry and how far we'd like to go now. But on the plus side, we get to review the plan every 5 years. So we can look at we'll just look around the country, what are other councils doing, who's got the latest policy. As soon as one policy goes through, then everyone can do it because it's gone through a planning inspector. So over the next 20 years, we will be able to update the local plan further and would you agree, make it adhere more to where we would like it to go over the next 20 years.
Thank you for that. I mean, yes, I agree. We should be ensuring that the emissions aspects of the buildings, both how we build them and their operation, we should be driving to net zero. But that's my point is that isn't, to my mind, as important as making sure that the developments will continue to be inhabitable later on. I mean, we know the tobacco industry downplayed the risks of their products for decades. The oil industry is still downplaying the risks of their products today. Developers will be very happy to develop buildings, sell them at today's prices, with no regard at all for the fact that those buildings might be uninhabitable in 40, 50, 60 years' time, because they have no liability, they have no accountability for that. So unless we put the proper controls and policies in place in the local plan, they will be developing things that they know will not be suitable for 100 years, or however long they wish to claim that their accommodation will be suitable for. We can't let them get away with that, I don't think. It's our responsibility to make sure they don't. And if you actually look at, if we put that climate resilience as a primary priority, or even making a significant priority, it's not just a tweak, it's not just a matter of writing a few extra paragraphs in the document. It actually has a substantial change on the way the planning process needs to work, because you end up doing what are called climate risk assessments. To do a climate risk assessment, you have to say what period of time you want that piece of development to be still usable for. And that means developers will have to say, well, this is a development I expect to last for 40, 50, 100 years. Obviously, the longer they make that period to be, the greater the risk assessment and the greater the accommodation they will need to make to the future impact of climate change. So it has a very significant impact on the way the planning works. It's not just something that you can sort of review and tweak in a few years' time.
Okay, thank you. I think I absolutely support what you're saying, and it's worth saying, but it's not strictly speaking what we're discussing, because we are discussing our plan rather than another plan which may well be better than our plan. So I'm going to draw a line on it then. I've got Duncan, June and Alex. Okay, and then we'll stop at Sam, okay? So Duncan, June and Sam. Duncan?
Okay, thank you. Right, two questions and quite short. Right, the first one, I'm quoting from one of our own internal papers to do with sustainable community strategy, and it talks about inequalities, and it says plan for development that promotes health and well-being and enable more opportunities for people to lead healthier lifestyles. It may well be that some green belt needs to be used to find strategic housing locations. But will you be taking cognizance of the fact that some green belt areas are just nice green belt area, nice green to look at, but there are others that have got footpaths or recreational facilities, etc., etc., and that they perhaps need to have greater consideration. So will you be thinking about health and well-being when you come to make decisions about where housing goes?
The short answer is yes, that will be one of the factors we need to look at. And it's not just in terms of the sort of function of the existing greenbelt, it's also if we were to seek to remove land from the greenbelt for development, we are required to provide or make compensatory improvements to the areas that remain in the greenbelt, and that can include in terms of recreational use, but also in terms of nature recovery. So I think any of the options that we look to bring forward, we would also make sure we're providing, you know, the necessary green infrastructure and, as you say, recreational opportunities, so that it very much does enable people to lead healthier lifestyles. So yes, that is one of the factors that we will take into account.
Thank you. And one final question, and it's to do with the online consultation. It's had a sort of checkered few weeks. It started a sort of day late. Shortly afterwards, because of an upgrade, none of the diagrams were available on site, on screen. Then it was discovered that for some of the responses, it was only accepting a few sentences and not the whole of somebody's response. And then it got discovered that if you press the submit button, it didn't work. You actually had to submit it twice to get the green box that gave you a receipt number and an acknowledgement sent to your email. In fact, I did a response several times before somebody made me aware of that problem. And that is why we have now yet another week added on. So my question is really that all these issues do undermine public confidence, and for something as major as this. So why couldn't this have been dummy run and checked before we started to make sure it worked?
I mean, the systems were tested before the start of consultation, and they were working. Some of the issues that arose partway through the consultation, as I understand it, I'm not technically au fait with it, but there was a problem with, for some reason, with the system that the council uses for its website, and it didn't just affect the local plan consultation; it affected other parts of the website. So some elements of the document didn't work, or the links didn't work for a few days. So that is why we have extended the consultation. But I do, hear what you're saying, Duncan, and it's something we need to make sure for the next stages of public engagement on the local plan that we do learn those lessons, and that we do test, all parts of the system really thoroughly, because I completely understand what you're saying. It does undermine public confidence in our consultation. So yeah, we will learn those lessons.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add an apology for all the problems that happened.
Okay, we've actually reached our 40 minutes, so I will accept the 3 questions I've got. So that's June, Sam, and then finally Sean. Okay, so June?
Thank you. Farrington Gurney, how was it decided to have 500 homes to be put there, when, as far as I understand, there are only at the moment about 300. So a huge extra amount of people will be coming into a small village. How are they expected to integrate into what is already a very long established community? That's point 1, please.
I mean, again, just to say, June, it hasn't been decided, it hasn't been proposed yet, so it is an option. But in terms of the 500 homes, that basically was derived from the fact that to have a smaller scale of development at Farrington Gurney was not possible, because the evidence was showing that there wasn't capacity in the primary school, for example, and some of the other sporting infrastructure. So therefore, if you're to look at options for growth at Farrington Gurney, it would need to be of a scale that enabled infrastructure to be provided to support that development. Now, for a primary school, you do need roughly 500 homes to support a new primary school. So that's very crudely, that's where the 500 figure came from. But just to reiterate again, we are very much at the option stage at this time. I do accept what you're saying, that that level of development, of course, would more than double the size of the village, so it would be a really, really fundamental change. No, we completely accept that.
Oh, sorry, did you hear that? Yeah. Thank you. To other towns and villages, as there's only one bus that goes between Wells and Bristol, and at the moment, virtually everybody living there will need a car, which of course is not environmentally sustainable, given our climate change goals.
Yes, and those are exactly the sort of issues we want people to raise in the consultation. And just to repeat it again, these are only options, but most of the easier options or the easier sites to develop, they've already been developed. So all of the options we're looking at now are quite challenging. There are public transport connections to Farrington Gurney, as you say, from Bristol to Wells, and that's a very good service. There's also the sort of Summer Valley Links project, which is a WECA project to make improvements to both public transport and walking and cycling connections in that part of the district as well. Those are some of the reasons why we sort of presented an option or two options at Farrington Gurney.
Thank you.
Sam.
Hello. Just one comment on the actual accessibility of it that I think just needs to go across. Parish councillors are actually finding it really difficult to engage with this process. I think if a parish councillor is, that says quite a lot. One parish councillor said they went to the website and tried to find it through the homepage and just didn't know what they were looking for. And I have to say, there is nothing on the homepage apart from you have to go through, have your say, and then it's right at the very bottom of every single thing on the list. And you've got to know that it's called the local plan consultation. And if you're not familiar with that, I think that's a bit challenging. It really should be front and centre on our website if it's a big deal as we're trying to put across. I also think it sounds like there's lots of councillors doing independent good work in their areas to support their parishioners, but it perhaps would be useful to have had, because there isn't the resources to do as many outreach activities from the council itself, it would have been useful to have had, say, a pack for councillors to actually run their own local plan rather than them all being done sort of independently by different people, because it does depend on how much time you have to put those things together and how much you understand it yourself. I was fortunate enough to sit on the steering group, so I feel like I have a bit of an insight, but there are lots of people who haven't, and I think that's a real challenge, especially to newer councillors who may not be as proficient with planning applications if you haven't sat on a parish council before. That was just a comment. I don't need any right reply. I think it's just one of those things to get out. So thanks for letting me say that. Predominantly, I was going to be coming here if I wasn't subbing as the chair of the task group for food security, which was put together from this panel. We're actually in the final stages of that now, with the report being pulled together and being presented at the May panel here. The key issues really are around, which mainly talked about were around allotments as well as agricultural land, but predominantly allotments, and key issues about availability of space and the protection of existing space that we have. There's a consideration of perhaps putting together an SPD specifically about allotments and how we actually increase the number we have across the district, as well as hold on to what we have and don't lose it to development. There does seem to be a lack of consistency in the approach with where the local plan is coming in, considering with the corporate strategy, which is very specific on how it deals with sustainability and how we're actually reaching our climate goals. Whereas I feel planning doesn't quite match into that, especially when it comes to land use, thinking about food security and food growing. So I think there is perhaps a wider piece of work that needs to go in that. A specific question that has sort of come out of it around allotment specifically was about how the areas taken out of the HELA and putting into those option documents have come about, especially considering some of the allotment areas, including Lark Hall, Fairfield Park and Combe Down, which seem to have options on them for being potentially suitable, potentially available and achievable sites for development, yet obviously that would need the Secretary of State to determine whether they could be changed. There's a query around how it was decided to nominate some of these areas, and is it a mistake to have included allotment sites in that? Why have some allotments been assessed as housing sites and not others, or indeed other types of open spaces, for example, football grounds? And in terms of planning, how is the council intending to protect those food growing spaces? So it all comes back into this kind of group that we've had set up, and whether we can put more of that into the local plan when it is kind of going through its phase through the consultation and beyond.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ross. I think your question was relating primarily to the HELA and the HELA process. So to try and answer the questions, if allotments and other green spaces have been assessed in HELA, that's because they would have been submitted by somebody, either the community or the landowner, as an area that they think is suitable for housing or employment development. In terms of the assessment process, sites are only shown as technically unsuitable, if you like, if there's what's defined a sort of primary constraint or a showstopper as to why development couldn't happen on that site. Now, allotments, yes, they're protected as a policy protection, but technically, from a technical feasibility perspective, yeah, they could be potentially suitable for development, but that doesn't mean to say, and that if they're assessed as potentially suitable, that doesn't give them any planning status, either in terms of a planning application or indeed in terms of planning policy for development. We then use the HEDA to then decide which sites we would put forward as options for allocation and then eventually allocation. We haven't identified allotment sites for potential allocation because that's contrary to our strategy, both corporately but also through the local plan. So I think that there's a need to separate out the HELA assessment, which is just evidence-based, and the proposed strategy and the proposed sites. They're two separate processes. So I hope that helps. I think I've probably had an email from another councillor, and I will respond with a bit more detail on that.
Sorry, I was just going to, can I just follow up on that? Yeah, I think there is perhaps and it does come down to the consultation as well, there is actually a confusion between how people see when they've been to some of the displays of what's put out there in terms of all the HELA options and then the options in the document as to how that actually works. So I think there is perhaps some clarity sort of around that. So, but I think part of what I was saying is that, you know, this task group that's put together is trying to encourage that we actually protect our growing spaces, and not just allotments but also agricultural land, because there does seem to be we do need to respect what's going on in our district in respect of that, as much as where we put housing as well.
Thank you. Two relatively short questions, you're pleased to hear. So the first one, I mean, going on to the Farrington-Gurney proposal, talking to the residents, I think that what it's doing is raising more questions than comments, because the devil is in the detail, and it doesn't exist in terms of we're telling them where we're going to build houses, but we're not telling them how we're going to build a community. We're not going to tell them where there's going to be a doctor's surgery or a dentist or a pharmacy or more shopping or schools or nurseries, and all those things that make the community rather than just a housing estate. There's no real data in there to explain what the cumulative effects are going to be when you start considering Hicksgate and Whitchurch as well, and what effect that's going to have with Bristol. There's no, from what I can see, there's no transport modelling that's been undertaken yet. So would that be right? Yeah. So so the whole thing is raising more questions than allowing people to actually make informed comments, and it doesn't just concern the residents. It really worries them. So that was my first question, if you like, is how do we address that with the residents?
From my point of view, I think there's a certain chicken and egg thing here, because what's come forward with the sites is indicative maps, but the question of what does, if you're going to put houses here, what does that need in terms of the community? And that's what the consultation is all about. Or to say, actually, this won't work because you can't do this and you can't do that. Therefore, you can never, you're creating a severed community or whatever, putting it both sides of a big road. That's the sort of local knowledge that comes back from a consultation. And I think it's chicken and egg. I mean, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to develop a whole site in terms of almost bringing it up to a pre-app stage and say, right, that's what we're planning to do? When we're just not at that stage. It's okay, look, this area has been put forward. We think it might work. We want to know what you think. And that's where that local knowledge comes in and is really important. I don't know if you want to...
I mean, only to add that, as Councillor McCabe has said, the work is very much at an early stage, and we've been quite open with that. We just felt it was better to engage people early in the process whilst there still were options that we were looking at. And again, as Councillor McCabe has said, to get that local knowledge and that local feedback to us. So that would also help identify additional areas of more detailed work that would be needed. I mean, you've raised, for example, transport modelling. Yes, that work hasn't been done. Not only because you need to model individual sites, but as you've pointed out, the cumulative impact. And until we know which options or which sites we bring forward, it's very difficult to model that sort of cumulative impact. So that work, just to reassure you and others, that work will be undertaken in informing the next stage of the local plan, when again we will go out to consult on that as well.
Thank you. I mean, the problem is that councils have a habit of delivering housing and not infrastructure. And we have decades of evidence of that. So that's where the concern is. The final question, which I'm hoping is very quick. One of the elephants in the room for me in this plan is the West of Bath sites, which has been put in as an option and almost in the same sentence being taken out as an option. So where are we in terms of considering that West of Bath sites as a genuine proposal?
I would just say, the site had come forward for consideration. The initial work that the officers have done through consultancy has said it will undoubtedly cause harm to the World Heritage, the green setting of the World Heritage Site. Therefore, you shouldn't proceed with it. But it was the wish of the elected members in the LDF steering group that it be included. So I don't know if you want to add anything about, but so what I've said in the public meetings that I've been to is that you've got to give us the benefits of a site like this. What are the benefits, the community benefits, the benefits to the west of Twerton? What's the benefits to that community? And if we get a raft of evidence that this is a really positive site, well then we'll be back in front of the LDF steering group in a few months' time. And you may be again giving us the steer that this has to come forward. And then we have to make the decision about whether we go and have a ding-dong with UNESCO about wanting to extend the city in this direction. So if you're still giving us a very strong steer via the LDF steering group in a few months' time, then obviously there is a big decision to be made about whether we want to have that battle with UNESCO. Can't be more open and honest than that. Is that it, Chuck?
I was just about to say, yeah.
I have a community. I have an over 60.
I know you do. I know. I'm very well aware of that, Matt. Okay. I don't know whether to congratulate you or commiserate with you, but whichever it is, fair enough. Yes, that is the end. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Matt, for coming and answering questions as honestly as you can, and I really believe you did that. I hope you have a good lunch, both of you for that matter. Okay, so we move on to the final item, which is the panel future work plan. I think, Sam, you've already done your task group report bit, so we are expecting it to come in May, so that will be in the plan. And the other bits that we had from the previous meeting is also in the plan. Does anyone else have anything that they want to say about the future plan going forward? I mean, most of you are substitutes, you probably don't care, but those of you who are, okay, well in that case, I will bring the meeting to a close at 19 minutes late. But never mind, not too bad.